from Cellar Angels and our world headquarters here in downtown Chicago, where it is a balmy 42 degrees outside and pouring rain, or as we like to say in Chicago, spring. So I am thrilled to be here this evening. As we all know, it's kind of some crazy times in the globe or around the globe right now, but this is our little sanctuary away from the madness. Not to diminish what the first responders and everybody is doing, and they're doing some heroic things, but for all of us, we just like to have a little levity. And the one thing that can bring us together is the one thing that's brought us together for the last 10 years, and that's wine. Tonight, we are thrilled to have with us a 40-year rock star in the Napa Valley, Michael Trujillo. So Michael, thank you so much.
Hey, it's gonna be fun. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. We first crossed paths, you and I think it was the way wine does make people's paths cross via introductions of multiple third parties. And I remember sitting in a car when you and I were talking. I was in Virginia Beach. This was, I think, 4 or so years ago. And you had multiple projects and you were contemplating, you know what, I've had this garage label, so to speak, for a long, long time. I haven't really put forth the energies and effort into it. I think I'm going to do that, and I think I want to be featured on Cellar Angels. So 40 years into that moment, talk to me a little bit about, wow, how did that decision come about, and what caused you to kind of, and we'll visit some of the consulting gigs, what caused you to want to kind of pioneer and move ahead with your own stuff?
Oh, great question. I mean, I'm an entrepreneurial at heart. I mean, I love creating. It's from my early years of being an engineer, I just love the creation and stuff. And wine is the magical creation. I mean, it's something that can't be done overnight. You know, cooking is, I love cooking as well, but you know, wine is a journey. Wine is a journey from the vineyard to the winery, you know, to the bottle, to the customer. And so to me, that's a huge, huge challenge. And to be able to, you know, to hit a home run with all of that is a lot of fun. So 40 years, that journey has all been about learning. I've had some great mentors in my life, some great opportunities, and now it's just a focus to all of that.
So walk us through, because I believe, if memory serves, you grew up in the Colorado area, and then it was a spring break venture where you were doing what most college young men will do, is they head to the ocean in search of surf, sun, and the other activities. Tell me a little bit about that and how you ventured up north the shoreline or the coastline up to the Napa area.
It was quite the journey. You're exactly right. I grew up in southern Colorado. My dad was a farmer, rancher. We had about 3,000 acres of agriculture.
Wow.
You know, in them days we grew a lot of barley for Coors, the beer brewers, so on and so forth. My mom was very instrumental to push us kids. I'm the oldest of 4. Push us out of the farming bubble. You know, get out there, go taste life, go get some college, and wherever your journey takes you. Well, for me, college was engineering. Like I said earlier, I love building. I was whizzing school. Took off, and then on my junior year, a couple buddies and one of my cousins, we took off on a road trip with no other agenda than to hit the West Coast and check out all that stuff we saw on TV. And you're right. You know, at that age, you're kind of interested in a lot of the female, you might say. When you get a few farm kids on the beach there in Venice Beach, we were overwhelmed. It didn't take long to head north, and we ended up in Napa Valley to visit a friend of the family. And that's where it all began.
Oh, that's awesome. It's funny, last week we had on, I don't know if you know Chad Angelo. Chad Angelo is, you might have introduced us to him. All right, I don't know, but he also was a Colorado guy, and he's actually on the stream right now, and he says to say hello and raise a glass. And I know we've got someone from Iowa, Dan Goderis, who is a huge fan of Cellar Angels, and one of our dearly beloved Amada is here in Chicago, also raising a glass to you and says hello.
Good.
Where did you go? Where was undergrad engineering?
So I started off in Western State in Colorado at a small college in Grand Junction. And I was whizzing school. Luckily, my brain is good at math. And I was about to transfer to DU. And in that intern is where we decided to do this crazy road trip. And ended up in Napa Valley, like I said, on this road trip. Ironically, my story has a really amazing full circle. We went down the driveway, what is now Sequoia Grove Winery. So the former owner, Jim Allen, was a friend of the family who I had never, ever met. We pull in, a bunch of farm boys, helped them plant vineyard, helped them drive stakes, helped them drive shovels, whatever it was. And then that night, his wife would put on this beautiful spread under the Napa Valley stars, and out came the wine. And luckily, Jim was Irish, so out came the beer and the bourbon. And 4 or 5 consecutive days of that, I was hooked. I called up my mom and took a spring break.
So you were actually on spring break, and you went there, pulled in the driveway of Sequoia Grove, and then you just started working as quote unquote hired hands or free labor, and you just worked for food, wine, beer, and bourbon?
That's kind of the way it was. I mean, Jim Allen at the time could not employ us because his kids were involved in the winery. So I actually found a job developing vineyard. And through my skills and education that I had in Colorado, surveying and engineering, I became a vineyard developer. And I moved up that ladder quite quickly. And that's where I started rubbing elbows with the great winemakers of Napa Valley. That's where it all began. And so 4 or 5 years in the vineyard is where I started.
So really, you had your feet in the dirt daily and kind of learning all of the special, unique terroir, so to speak, and all the different AVAs of the Valley. And talk to me about a couple of the early mentors that were instrumental in shaping and molding you today.
Well, yeah, in those early years, and we're talking early 82, 83, 84, 1982, 3, 4, it was just beginning here in Napa Valley. And so when I was working in the vineyards and, say, socializing with Jim Allen, you're rubbing elbows with Mondavi, the Mondavis, Cake Bread was right next door. I mean, just Tony Soder was a hotshot winemaker at the time. But the most influential person that I've ever had in my life was a gentleman named Andrei Chelachev.
Oh, yeah.
He was a consulting winemaker in the 80s, and actually Jim Allen used to hire him as a consultant in the 80s. Now, I wasn't working at Sequoia Grove, but I was definitely absorbing every single moment I had to be with him, next to him, and just learning about wine. It was amazing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an analogy to what that exposure and you having the proximity to that. I mean, it would be akin to just walking next to Bear Bryant in the Alabama years, or George Halas. I mean, he's a legend in the industry, and he's noteworthy for a couple of different things. Walk us through, if you will, kind of some of his noteworthiness and what are the things he brought to you that said, this is how you take care of Chardonnay, or this is what you want to have from a vineyard representation in Cabernet. How did you learn all of that?
That's a great question, because with him, Jim Allen, and a few other people, as I was every day getting a little bit more of the wine bug, obviously I'm asking more and more and more questions. How do you do this? How do you do that? How did this come about? And it was, they said, listen, you have to go learn the science part of winemaking. It's like what you tell everybody. I mean, you can only learn so much from a textbook or experimentation. So I did enroll into UC Davis, and I enrolled into the extension program there because I had to make a living and at the same time. But my fortunate part was I got to come home and do my homework with some great winemakers, Andrei Chelachev being one of them. So the question that you asked me, what makes Andrei such an amazing winemaker, is I was learning the science at school, the chemistry side of it, how to create wine. Andrei was one of those mentors that taught you the art of understanding wine. It was your creation from within. And the best way to tell what I say about Andrei is Andrei taught me the art of winemaking. UC Davis taught me the science.
That's a great way to put it. So, fast forward to your own label, and we'll get into some of the stops that you had previously, because they in and of themselves are quite noteworthy as well. But walk me through the portfolio, and for all of the Cellar Angels fans and people that want to get this rosé, it's on our website right now. You can, of course, go to cellarangels.com. And The angel portion, as you know, Michael, and most everybody knows, but the angel portion of our name is because a portion of every transaction goes to charity, and the consumer gets to pick the charity. And one of the things that I want to mention this evening is that we're very impressed with an organization called World Central Kitchen, and Chef Jose Andres is all over the news right now. And we put them up on the potential charity partner list to give donations to after Hurricane Dorian. And we just have left them up there because these guys are amazing. They are now trying to feed everybody in communities all over the United States, and they just build kitchens. They take over restaurants that are now closed. And so tonight through Sunday, anybody that buys wine and picks World Central Kitchen, we're going to double the contributions that we raise for them. So on our website right now is your rosé. And rosé is something that has absolutely exploded in popularity in the last 5 to 10 years. Why has it exploded so much?
You know, that's a great question. It's so easy to drink. It's a refreshing wine. It's maybe a little bit of a bridge into wine. It's summery. It's festive, light, delicate. There's a lot of reasons I think rosé is popular now.
And there's a couple different ways to make it, and there's some science obviously to this that you talked about, and there's different styles. So tell me a little bit about what's in my glass. The most recent vintage just got bottled. And what do you use for inspiration? What grapes do you like? What type of style do you like? What are you after?
Okay. The Madeline label, which is named after my daughter, it's more of a line of wine that I want to be fun and almost whimsical. It's a line of wine that I'm not trying to be very, very specific on varietal. You know, it's meant to be fun and casual.
Right.
To the point, if you look at the label is the back pocket of a pair of denim jeans. You know, when you're wearing your jeans, you're chilling out, you're relaxing. And that's what these wines are all about.
And the label even has a little tag on it, which I love.
Yeah, that's where I state the alcohol.
It's a gorgeous label.
First of all, when you go into the Madeline wines, you just have to, throw all of the varietal, all the specifics, just throw it out the window and just think fun and casual. And I have the same approach when I make them, whether it's the white, the rosé, or the red wine. I'm not trying to be traditional. I'm not trying to be like everybody else. Matter of fact, I'm somewhat trying to be a little bit different.
Okay.
And it's that difference that I'm trying to capture for uniqueness and just yumminess. So when I was venturing off to make a rosé, I wasn't trying to make, the traditional sort of old world of Provence or, those style, that light, dainty, little delicate, light in color. I wanted something that had flavor. When you were sitting on your patio or out in your backyard or on your boat, I wanted to have flavor. I wanted to have tasty yumminess, but at the same time, very balanced structure, good acidity. You take one sip and you want to have another sip and another sip and another sip. So my rosé has a tendency to be a little bit more flavorful. I purposely blend some really crazy stuff into it to give it some pop. It is made directly from the grape. It's not a Signé wine.
Okay, now it's funny because I was going to ask you about that. What does that mean, that it's not a Signé wine?
So for us winemakers, when we're making red wines of any varietal, as we crush into the tank, before we start giving up the color of the skins, we immediately sort of bleed out some of that free run juice before it starts getting color. And so nothing more than cracking the bottom valve of the tank or the bottom door, and you just sort of bleed out a percentage, anywhere from 5 up as high as 20% of this pinkish sweet juice. And then off you go and you ferment your red wine. Now that byproduct is what we call Signé, or bleed off or bleed down.
Great.
Many rosés can be made from that.
Interesting. And it's funny, we talked earlier about why the explosion of rosé. And part of the reason also might be that finally the disassociation of it being sweet was shattered. And I think there was some small producer, Sutter something, that might have actually had something to do with White Zinfandel. And I remember when we owned the retail wine shop, people would come in and they just had this preconceived notion that it was always going to be horrendously sweet. And we had to work extra hard to say, no. And then, so there was converts, but I think enough of us in the retail business and in the wine business and the production business said, you have to try this. It's not sweet. And I think that has contributed to it. I do love that what you're talking about is not Signet style. We comment every time we open up a bottle, we comment on the color. And it is just so brilliant and perfect density. And you're right, it's not light in color or in body, but it is fun. And you do want to have more than one sip. So mission accomplished.
Thank you.
On that. And so that's the Madeline. And I want to talk a little bit more about in a minute why your daughter is such an inspiration to you. But if we go back to the Spring Breaker, the tan engineering guy that's pounding fence posts for spring break, I'd be curious, by the way, I went on spring break and I went to school in Colorado.
Okay.
So we went south to Texas. And I promised you that if I had told friends we're going to pull into someone's driveway in South Padre Island, Texas, and we're going to go in their backyard and pound fence stakes, I would not have had many friends. So, although I guess if we got paid in beer and wine and bourbon and food at a college kid on that income level, would seem like a good trade.
Yeah, I would have to say we scored pretty well.
And is that where the proverbial bug bit you, where you just thought, holy cow, this is actually beautiful, it's fun, it's because you were living in Colorado and grew up there, so you were exposed to the mountains. Me being a Midwesterner living in the Chicago area, when I first saw the mountains, it was something like I'd never seen before. You had them. So what bit you? What kind of were you sunk your teeth into to look at the engineering and look at the artwork and just say, I think I might want to do this?
Well, first of all, I probably didn't get bit by the wine bug for a couple of years. It was the California lifestyle. I mean, Napa Valley is a gorgeous place. It's an oasis, and even back then, it's magical. The weather, there's no mosquitoes, no bugs, no nothing. It's a magical place. Now take being a college kid for 3 years and having basically minimal amounts of spending money,
right?
Jumping into a job that's paying you handsomely for a 12-hour day work, and you're a young kid. I mean, I was living a rock star life.
Yeah.
So the first couple of years had really nothing to do with wine. Now, along the way, yes, I was tasting wine not only with Jim and peers and colleagues, but I can actually remember the exact night. I was invited to dinner, to Monterey, and we went to the sardine factory. And back then, in the mid '80s, the sardine factory was one of the hottest restaurants in Monterey. And the people that I was with, they ordered a really old red Burgundy. I couldn't tell you who the producer was, but I just remember this wine having about 30, 35 years on it.
Wow.
And they poured it for the table, and I was just wowed to be there and be a guest. But I can remember just sticking my nose into that wine and just imagining that whoever made that 30, 40 years ago may or may not still be around, and just what was going on in the world back then. But just having that poetry, it was like a piece of art. And then being able to taste it and having that same magic of balance and texture, and I mean, you just savored everything about it. And that's when I got the wine bug. That's when I wanted to create something that I had in front of me right at that moment. That's when I wanted to become a winemaker. That's
awesome. And that's a fascinating story, because in doing this Cellar Angels for 10 years and owning the wine store before that, everyone that we've encountered, interviewed, and built a relationship with has some sort of a wine bug story. And people ask me, what got you into wine? And I had a similar experience at a wine shop where I had used to frequent, and I was in my 20s. So I was a neophyte as it came to wine. And one of the great wine shop owners pulled me aside and said, here, I want you to taste this. And my palate was by no means advanced or anything like that. And it was I don't remember the vintage, but it was a Chateau Haut-Brion And yeah, and so that was one of those ones. You're right. You put your nose in it, and then the fireworks. You're like, okay, I get it now. There's a whole heck of a lot going on right here that is amazing. And I also love that poeticness that you just talked about, where you can actually go back in time. And we've said this for years at Cellar Angels, that wine is a liquid passport to travel the world. And you can see, wow, what was going on in 1992 or 1984 or something like that, geopolitically, what was going on environmentally, what was going through the winemaker's head when he or she was trying to craft this. And there's very few products that give you that entree into another world. And it's interesting. I think it's fascinating that that's how you got bit. And so now you mentioned this isn't Signé. We have a question where someone says, well, what type of style making is it? How did you make the wine?
Well, this is the rosé that I make is not made from Signé. It's made from the grape.
Right.
So it starts in the vineyard, and I harvest the grapes, as directed to be in a rosé. I want higher acid. I don't want any ripeness. I want my I'm picking at 21, 22 bricks sugar, where if it was a red wine, you'd be 3-4 points higher. I'm also wanting to source from cooler growing regions. Napa Valley is, we're blessed here for growing great Bordeaux wines, Chardonnay is down in Carneros and stuff. Plus the real estate's crazy expensive. So I choose to go shopping for my grapes up in Mendocino area, or even North Coast. I mean, the first Madelines that I made came off of a Syrah vineyard on the very northern part of the North Coast area. And so I want cool climate red grapes off the vine, whole cluster, press them, and then take that juice and venture off into making rosé. Now, the rosés of the past under the Madeline label have always been Syrah based. I love that Rhone, that Syrah style of rosé. Unfortunately, 2018 was the last vintage of this particular source because they pulled the vineyard out post-harvest on 18.
Right.
So I was scrambling to try to recreate my rosé, and I don't make a lot of it. We're only talking a couple hundred cases, so I'm a small shopper, you might say.
Sure.
Now, I went to the same grower, I went to the same source, and I said, what do you have? He said, well, I have Sangiovese. And I said, I don't know about Sangiovese. Let me see what it's tasting like on the vine. Can I give you a decision in the growing season? He said, no problem, no problem. So when I went up there and started tasting the grapes on the vine, wow, this is exactly kind of what I'm looking for. And so I changed gears, and I went from Syrah to Sangiovese. I also, in my shopping for grapes, found some great Grenache. And so this year, this is, it's about 40% Sangiovese, 40% Grenache. And I play with it with a little bit of Malbec that I sourced from a fellow vintner. And I purposely play with Gewürztraminer and Sauv Blanc into that rosé.
Wow. Now that is kind of a field blend, if you will. That is awesome.
It's different.
That is fantastic. And I would imagine a gentleman with the last name of Trujillo, this is not the first time you've sampled Sanjo off the vine.
It is not, but it's never really captured my attention to make wine out of it until I made a rosé.
Interesting. And the name Madeline, walk me through the inspiration behind that and why it's so darn special.
When I started the Trujillo brand, 2011 was my first vintage, and I only made Cabernet Sauvignon. In all I do, and everybody that I consult for, every project I've led, I always create a label that I can spill down to so that I can keep the top tier wine at its most prestige, quality, consistency, so on and so forth. So in other words, my Trujillo main blend, there's always going to be some pieces that go make the blend. They get cut away. Not because they're inferior, it's just they don't fit into the puzzle of perfect balance on the Trujillo cab.
Okay.
Fill those remnants down, or those pieces downward, and I create a secondary blend. Now, obviously, with Trujillo, that's a red blend. Everything I've ever been involved with, whether it's her blend with the two old dogs, I formerly owned Carl Lawrence. I had an Alden label. I had Sequoia Grove. We had Rebellious Red. All of my consulting that I do, there's always something I can spill down to. Okay, so I have 2 red wines. I opened up a tasting room in St. Helena. It's kind of hard to wow people with just 2 red wines. I'm hosting winemaker dinners. I have a wine club, so on and so forth. So I had the inspiration to start just making fun wines. And that's where I came up to expand the Madeline label. Now, why Madeline? So my daughter's name is Sophia Madeline Trujillo. So Madeline is her middle name.
Okay.
Now, it would have been cool to use Sophia. However, as we all know, that's pretty well taken and pretty well cornered. And the last thing I want to do is get a deceased and stop and deceased letter from a fellow neighbor over here. Yeah. But Madeline's a good fit. Madeline is a beautiful name under my daughter, and it's what I chose to go with.
How old is your daughter?
Today she's about 15 and a half, so she'll be 16 here short in November. She'll be 16 in November.
And from what I understand, she probably is not too far from you when she was an infant, trailing you in the vineyards and in the production facility and on the forklifts, and might take to this like duck to water, so to speak.
She was a good pellet. She's practically does a good job with wine.
Oh, that's fantastic. So and I love the Madeline label. I love the entire Trujillo label, but you just mentioned in that last couple sentences a few noteworthy brands that you produced Cabernet for. And you're right, Napa Valley is known for Cabernet Sauvignon. So right. if you're going to be in Napa, you better be able to make a stellar Cabernet. So what was your inspiration behind Cabernet? Because after 40 years and now making your own label, you probably know the single best vineyard blocks, the single best growers, the vineyard managers. You can weave all of this into the tapestry that is the Trujillo label, but where did the knowledge come from to be able to make wine at Herb Lamb and to be able to source grapes in that area? And what are you particularly after in a great Cabernet?
You're right. Almost 4 decades I've made wine from almost every square mile of Napa Valley. As you know, I launched and created a label back in the early 90s called Carl Lawrence. Carl was my middle name. Lawrence was my founding partner's middle name. So we combined the 2 middle names, ironically, Madeline. And Carl Lawrence, my inspiration for Carl Lawrence Cabernet was the first winemakers to combine Howell Mountain or mountain fruit with Valley Floor. And Carl Lawrence was an amazing success. However, it was always had to be sort of a moonlight or a secondary project for me because I was busy making a living. I was a hired winemaker at other facilities, so it was a secondary project. Carl Lawrence was without a doubt a success. It became coined the cult wine without the cult price. I'd release it June 1st and I'd be done by June 5th.
Wow.
So it was a perfect world for me. However, the partnership along its journey, it wasn't cohesive. So I chose to break away and I rebooted on my own. No partners, no other money involved. It's solely owned by myself. That's why first time ever it has my name on it. However, I took all of the grape and exact same grape sourcing that I had with Carl Lawrence. It all came over with me over to Trujillo. So those same vineyards, the Gary Morzoli vineyard in Rutherford, I have a Howell Mountain vineyard, I have a St. Helena vineyard. All of those vineyards that I used to make Carl Lawrence with, plus new vineyards, are now making the Trujillo wine. And in Madeline, the Madeline Red Cuvée gets those same vineyards, where obviously the white and the rosé are sourced from other places.
That is, and you're right. I knew the Carl Lawrence story vaguely, and I used to be amazed at the Carl Lawrence wines, and I'm now connecting the dots going, well, it makes perfect sense that you made such a spectacular wine, because that wine was a decadent, wonderfully balanced, incredibly nuanced Cabernet Sauvignon. And I love the fact that you pulled Valley Floor and blended it with mountain fruit. Is there any particular origin that you like better one over the other? I mean, do you prefer mountain Cabernet as opposed to Valley Floor? Is it always going to be a blend?
My favorite vineyard, and I think I love the Rutherford area, the Rutherford AVA, the Rutherford Bench. I've been making wine from Gary Morizoli Vineyard through most of my career, 30 plus years.
Wow.
In good and bad, weak and strong, not only is it a great site, but it just makes a great wine every single vintage. Even on a tougher, challenging vintage, you'll still get a great wine. So my favorite has to be Gary Morizoli Vineyard in Napa Valley, right in Rutherford.
Well, and Rutherford is so fantastic of an AVA. They have a society named after dust.
Oh yes, that's right. and it's an easy, it's an easy character to pick out of Rutherford base cabs. You do get that dusty cherry note from it.
You do, and it's a dusty cherry, almost a soft mocha note that is hard to describe, except you're like, oh, this is kind of dusty in a good way. Not, I just walked into a house that has been shuttered for 15 years way. There's something that's really wonderful about it. Raising the glass to a couple folks, a bunch of folks that have jumped on, I can't keep up with. The Sudlows, Jeff Greasy, Colin, some gentleman named Colin or Colin, I don't know what he goes by. That actually happens to be my brother, so I do know what he goes by. But
okay.
So is there a wine that you're partial? Is it Cabernet? Is it anything that's close by and open? What are some of your favorite wines?
Crafting Cabernet is probably the biggest challenge for me. It's the king of the hill for me. In my mind, it's a long journey, and I just love making Cabernet. However, nowadays, now that I'm on my own and I'm not so busy with so many other side projects, I no longer really have a day job outside of what I do today. Just before a couple hours ago, I was sitting at my kitchen table blending, and I love it. I just love that freedom and that creativity, and having no pressures to rush back to a job or to work, or I'm very, very happy to be in a place now where I can just craft. And yes, Cabernet. I still do a little bit of consulting, and Cabernet. I'm brought on to make Cabernet. However, I have a couple clients where I'm actually making wine from Gamay. I'm making a Petit Verdot standalone. I'm having fun. These Madeline wines are just a true test of me just having fun. Who blends Gewürztraminer with rosé?
I know, not many people. The mad scientist who's an art lover and a romantic, I think, is who.
But that's what makes this rosé pop. Every time I put it in front of somebody, I'll get, I don't do rosé. But the minute they smell and taste it, why is this so different? And it is different because of that sort of 3-4% of Gewürz and that couple percent of Sauv Blanc. And you can tell when you taste that wine, it's very bright. There's good acidity. It's very refreshing. It's not high in alcohol. It's, the residual sugar there's a little bit of RS behind, but not by no means sweet. So
you're right. And the Gewürz obviously very aromatic, so that can give it some of the bouquet lift, but certainly the intensity and the oomph behind it is there, but there is no sweetness. There might be some very low RS there, but it's not that cloyingly sweet wine that people tend to associate with a pink wine. Right. It is, and the acid, you're absolutely right. You can feel it in a good way that begs for food. So what food would you want to have with this or suggest with this?
Well, rosé is always good just to drink when you're cooking dinner or sitting by the pool. But, I've really discovered that my style of rosé really holds up well to to foods that have a little bit of spice or a little bit of glow to them. Like Cajun with that spicy sausage, curry, even some of the Asian dishes that have a little bit of the red pepper spice to it. Surprisingly, this does very, very, very well with those kind of little bit of glow in the food.
Okay. So what is overall total case production for your now own eponymously labeled wine Trujillo?
The entire portfolio right now is about 25 cases. I'm gradually growing. I'm not pushing it crazy. The Madeline wines are taking off on me. It's crazy how quick the Madeline demand is becoming.
And 2,500 cases is nothing, as you know. So what is there a desire to grow larger than that? But grow larger than 25 cases? 2,500? He froze.
Oh, you can never say no. You can't say no.
Wait, hang on. I'm having some technical difficulties on this end. Let me check the studio. You have like 80 windows open. Are you having any difficulties? He's frozen.
I don't know. Let me ask the girls.
Unless it's on your end, Michael. But I can see you, but it's locked and frozen. Which actually is, hold that thought on the production, because we got some viewer mail, and it's a good time. There we go. Wait. Can you hear me now?
I'm a farmer. I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. Now your image was frozen and your voice was not coming over.
You were doing totally fine. I could hear and see you the whole way.
We've got to feed our hamsters more on this end.
Believe me, I am not a tech guy, so Andrea over here is supporting me over at my end.
I know the feeling. So the industry is difficult, and one of the things we talk about a lot is selling wine is the challenge. And there's usually, it seems over the years, that there's a points, volume, distribution ratio somehow that is a very, very difficult formula to master. You've got a 40-year stellar pedigree of making wines, which is really, really solid. How do you get that name out into the marketplace? And what is the biggest challenge that you've seen over the last 40 years as it relates to the industry?
Marketing, without a doubt, is much, much different today. I mean, the arena is definitely more crowded. There's a lot more wine. It's a lot different today. It was 20 years. I'm very happy to have 40 years under my belt. I'm very happy to have a good reputation. And what I bring forth is, consistency, without a doubt. And I have a great story to my wines. And when I'm out in the marketplace, whether it's my wine club or a private event somewhere, or even selling my wine through a distributor, it has a story. I'm proud and fortunate to have that. I'm not a newcomer on the block, and that's going to be to my advantage. And it already is. It already is to my advantage.
So if someone's coming to the Valley and they want to taste with you, first of all, I want to go to your kitchen where you're just blending at the kitchen table. So let's get that on the calendar. So if someone wants to come, I know your tasting room is fairly new to us, and in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. Where is it in St. Helena?
So as you come from the south, heading north on Highway 29, right as you come into town, right before you come into town, we'll be on your left-hand side. So we're 661 Main Street. So some of our neighbors is Cliff Families right next door to us.
Oh, sure.
Across the street is the Farmstead restaurant. So we're just as you come into Napa. We have good signage. You can find us pretty easy.
Yeah, it's probably about as perfect an afternoon as you can have is to spend a little time tasting in your tasting room and then walk across the street to Farmstead and have a bite to eat. It's pretty magical.
It's not bad. And, we have, Cliff family has a little Pusetta truck next door. They park it next door. And we have so many of our guests that come in and we'll go order a little takeout lunch there, and they come in and enjoy it in our tasting room with some great wine. So that's a common thing that we promote. Andrea promotes here, and people are welcome to do that.
And it's funny because Cliff family, we've featured them a couple of times, and you're right. It's great that you two are right there, because it's interesting. Many of us that have been to the Valley have driven up and down Route 29 1,000 times and not know that Cliff is right there and that you're right there. And when you sit in the back of Cliff and you're outdoor in the patio and you're in kind of that garden area, you would think you're a million miles away from 29. And then to have that food truck there and to have your wine, that's a great little arrangement there. So well done on that.
Yeah, and with if the customer or the visitor gives us a little bit advance notice, I mean, we do lunch, we bring lunches in or charcuterie plates or whatever it may be. We host a lot of lunches and dinners here. We have a lot of fun here.
That's awesome. Is there anything that has surprised you in the last several years about the industry that most people wouldn't know? What are people shocked to learn about?
That's a good question. I think technology is definitely becoming a wonderful player for us, both in the agricultural side and in the winemaking side. I think within the last 5 or 10 years, the advancement of technology inside of winery facilities and making wine, automation, computers, however we want to talk about it, is just making wines better and better. I never, when I thought about 10, 15 years ago, can wines get better? Oh my God, they get better. And then that all starts from the vineyard all the way to even bottling is high tech now. So technology would probably be the biggest advancement, biggest surprise.
Anything that you would like to see from an industry standpoint that is currently not happening that would be wonderful for the consumer and actually for you, the producer?
Just learning more about wine. I mean, don't be, wine sort of had a persona of having, being knowledgeable and sophisticated. I don't come from that camp. I mean, we all have to start somewhere. Look at me. 30 years ago, I was drinking beer and bourbon and a little bit of wine. Don't be afraid of wine, and price, believe me, price doesn't warrant quality. I mean, there's so many great values out there, so many good wines that are overlooked because maybe they're too much, they're a value or they're, an odd blend. Just adventure, just have fun. You'll discover some great wines. And, for me, people ask me all the time, what's your favorite wine? For me, it's not so much a favorite wine. It's usually a favorite producer, a favorite winemaker, a favorite region. And that's what I promote customers to pursue. Don't so much go for the points or the critics or the price. There's a lot of discovery out there. And that's what I think is really, really gratifying, is the discovery of something really great.
Well, and it's funny, we completely echo that sentiment. And we've said for years, even when we own the retail shop, don't be fooled by price, because there are thousands of great wines out there that are expensive. Right. And there are thousands of expensive wines that aren't great. So you have to kind of find the journey. And the journey is that discovery process, which is half the romance, half the fun, half the fulfillment, half the reward. There's a lot of halves there. I get that. You're the engineer, so you can make that all one. But really, it's the bringing of people together. It forces you to slow down. It forces you to enjoy it. And also, as we talked about it, it gives you a little glimpse into what was happening. Where was that person thinking? What was happening that year from a Mother Nature perspective? And that is a pretty unique aspect of it. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. Don't be fooled by critics. Don't be swayed by points. Just follow your palate. If you happen to love a wine and it's $11, love it all the way and laugh all the way to the bank.
Exactly. Have it often. But I want to add the magic about wine. I grew up with a farming background, and we grew hay, grain, beans, potatoes. We grew everything. Wine is one of the only agricultural products on the planet that is, once it's bottled, it continues to be in motion. It's a living thing, and it's always everyday changing. I can't think of any agricultural product that you could say that for. Things have to be freeze dried, frozen, whatever it may be. But wine is the only agricultural product that is always in motion. And it's that motion and knowing when to catch the right dance and the right time that makes wine fun. And
that's awesome. I've actually never even, we know obviously because we're in the business that it's always a living, breathing, evolving thing, but I did not know that it's the only agricultural product like that. That is interesting to think about, because you're right. Every other agricultural product is canned, is frozen, is mixed with something else, and then freeze dried or whatever.
right.
That's a good point. So when are we going to get together?
Hey, I have open doors. Welcome anytime. You can come and help me blend at my kitchen table, or you can come to the tasting room and we'll go get some lunch.
That, my friend, is not a hard sell. I'll tell you, I can't thank you enough for taking some time out of your busy day today. It means the world to us, and you are certainly, in the industry perspective and really as a human being, and your kindness and generosity know no bounds. We love that you're crafting wine and pursuing the passion. We love how much the inspiration of your daughter is behind this label. That's magic right there in and of itself. And these are trying times, and if we can come together with the beverage that you and I both love, that's universal, life could be a lot worse than that.
That's well said. Well said.
I'm going to sign off to you and let you go enjoy your weekend. And next week, for everyone with Cellar Angels, we are going to put in links the opportunity to go ahead and grab some McLaren. And then after that, as a young lady who you're going to want to actually meet, Jacqueline Renee, who crafts a Pinot Noir. Next week with McLaren, this will be an interesting one because this gentleman is from Scotland. So you're going to have to listen closely because there's a brogue there that even I have a hard time with, but he makes some incredible wine, and his journey, very similar to yours, is one of passion, one of happenstance, circumstance, luck, hard luck, good luck, but all of it was just bitten by the wine bug. And these things, if we can get an hour out of our day to just relax, come together and appreciate all that we have, because it is bountiful, then we're going to be better for it, because we're going to come out on the other side of this better for the experience. And we can't do it without people like yourself, Michael. So thank you so much.
Well, again, thank you, Martin. Good talking to you. Good to be here.
Cheers. Thanks so much. Take care.